All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Wes here, and today we've got some stuff to talk about for God of War Ragnarok. As you guys know, God of War Ragnarok is one of the biggest Sony games of all time, and as of recording this video, it is actually their biggest game launch ever. This thing sold more than 5 million copies in its first week and over 11 million copies by the end of its third month on the market, so naturally Sony is going to want to milk this thing a little bit more where they can. Real quick, guys, thanks so much to King Arthur Legends Rise and Kabam for sponsoring today's video. King Arthur Legends Rise is an emerging title within the squad RPG space that's going to make a big splash. This game is poised to take on Raid Shadow Legends. I've talked about this game before, and I cannot wait to give you guys another look. This game is an all-new turn-based collection RPG featuring an immersive story and expansive exploration set in a stunning reimagined Arthurian world. Collect Arthurian legends, conquer knights, dragons, and the old gods, forge epic fantasy weapons, and advance your kingdom of Camelot. The game features unreal visuals and graphics. It has a strategic turn-based combat system that feels similar but unique in its own way, and of course it features a variety of dungeon boss battles. If you want to discover the hype for yourself, you'll find everything you need in the description of this video. Make sure you click the link below, wishlist on Steam, and pre-register today. I really feel like this could be a breakout title for 2023. Pre-registration will give you huge launch rewards that you won't want to lose out on. Be sure to follow @PlayKingArthur on socials to learn more. And thank you to King Arthur Legends Rise for sponsoring today's video. Despite there being no formal announcement of anything God of War related at the May PlayStation Showcase, there is still a ton of news to go over due to some recent job listings and insider intel from Santa Monica Studios suggesting that there will be new God of War content coming sooner than you probably think. In today's video, we're going to go over everything we know about the future of God of War, including the recent information that's come out about a potential God of War expansion, or at the very least the upcoming PC port, and how they will all play into the next full game release. So despite God of War being completely absent from the May PlayStation Showcase mere days after the live stream, it was noticed that Santa Monica Studios had posted a job listing that seemed to suggest that a Norse-themed God of War project is in development, despite Ragnarok being marketed as the end of the Norse timeline. Up to this point, we've been told by Santa Monica Studios and Sony themselves that Ragnarok is the end of the Norse era for the God of War series, and the next mainline game, tentatively titled God of War 6, will be another refresh of the series that brings us an entirely new setting and presumably with new gameplay and combat systems. However, on May 28th, a new job listing at Santa Monica Studios started circulating around the internet due to the description that seemed to suggest that this actually isn't the case. The job listing is for a senior combat designer, and this new hire will be in charge of companions, but that's not the interesting part. There are a couple of lines in the job description that state a new hire must have knowledge of God of War 2018 as well as God of War Ragnarok and be able to speak in depth about the mechanics, which is a very interesting thing to require of a new combat designer. I mean, think about it. If this job listing were for the next mainline God of War game, they presumably wouldn't need to know much about the Norse theme of God of War as well as its combat mechanics, because God of War 6 is confirmed to be heading to a new location and is all but confirmed to have new gameplay mechanics. Obviously, Santa Monica Studios would likely want their new combat designer to have knowledge of the Norse timeline for the sake of the continuity, but it likely wouldn't be a requirement if they were planning on going in a new direction with the gameplay, which they presumably are. That being said, the job listing raises some interesting questions about where God of War is actually going next, and it seems to lend some credence to these theories of God of War Ragnarok actually getting some kind of paid expansion, or the overall God of War series will get a spin-off game that will hold us over until the release of God of War 6. With the raging success of God of War Ragnarok, it seems very easy to believe that Sony would want to greenlight some kind of expansion or spin-off game, especially if God of War 6 is likely still at least another 3 to 4 years away, which seems to be the case. And remember, Sony is not above releasing paid expansions for first-party games long after their release window, because earlier this spring they released a massive paid expansion for Horizon Forbidden West, which launched all the way back in February of 2022, meaning that the expansion came roughly 14 months after the launch of the initial game. With God of War Ragnarok selling way more than Horizon Forbidden West, it seems completely believable that Sony wants to get an expansion out as soon as possible, at least before they release the PC port of the game that has a director's cut that has the expansion included. But I'm guessing if that were the plan, they would have already started production on it already. So with that being said, I don't actually think this new job listing is for Ragnarok DLC, but do I think Ragnarok DLC is going to be released? Well, I'm on the fence on that currently, because there is something else that I can think is much more likely. By hiring a new combat designer who needs knowledge of the Norse God of War gameplay system and who will be in charge of a companion system, it seems to suggest that there will actually be a new spin-off game set within the Norse timeline launching before the transition to a new setting. It's 100% confirmed that God of War 6 is in development at Santa Monica Studios, so that game is likely still the main focus, but if the company is bringing on new workers with knowledge of the Norse era game, gameplay, I think it means that Sony has seen the potential in a Norse spin-off game, just like the previous rumors have stated. There's a lot of debate amongst insiders and community members on whether or not Cory Barlog is working on a spin-off game, or if it's a completely new IP outside of the God of War realm. It's totally possible, but if he's working on a spin-off, it would make sense that this is what they're hiring for. Whatever the game is in development, if it's a spin-off or whatever it is, that game is still likely very early into production, but this new addition to the game's workforce will likely start as soon as possible, with the goal of building something awesome out of the assets that God of War Ragnarok has already constructed, while the A-team continues chugging along on God of War 6. Or as I said before, whatever project Cory Barlog is working on next, I have a feeling that that is what this is for. Now, some people speculated that the new addition to the workforce were for the PC port of God of War Ragnarok that we know is coming, but I think that's completely false, as a PC port wouldn't require a new combat designer, and I believe they have another studio that's working on the PC port. Now, given what we know about the state of the God of War franchise and the projects confirmed to be in development, I think that the only real explanation for the studio needing a new combat designer is because they're working on something brand new within the Norse continuity that will likely be rushed through development as a way to continue the story, as well as tie up some of the loose ends before God of War 6 takes us in an entirely new direction. Now, there is another possibility that I really hope is not the case, but another big focus for the PlayStation brand, specifically with the PlayStation VR, is we've seen other games like Horizon get a VR game as well. So if they're hiring somebody that's a new combat designer that has to know about the Norse gameplay, it would totally make sense to see a God of War VR utilizing the God of War Ragnarok engine as well as assets. Imagine getting to play as Kratos in a God of War Ragnarok VR. Honestly, I would buy that, and I think with what they did with Horizon, a VR game from Santa Monica Studios that's based on God of War could be where things are headed, which technically would still be a new spin-off game, but I think that that would upset a lot of people. Now, as for when this new spin-off game will be announced or possible DLC, it has been rumored that PlayStation is actually going to be holding another showcase in the fall, and that's where most of their first-party games are going to be shown off. As you probably have heard me say by now, the May PlayStation showcase was incredibly underwhelming due to the shocking lack of first-party content, but after that live stream concluded, some of the mysteries started being solved by reporters and journalists who did some digging as to why Sony was holding back. Apparently, Naughty Dog's upcoming Last of Us multiplayer game is in a really rough state, which is why it got delayed, and obviously if Sony was going to show off a bunch of first-party content, they would want all of their ducks in a row. So even though there are several first-party projects ready to go, Naughty Dog simply didn't have anything to show at the May showcase, so it's very likely Sony changed course and decided to make their event a big display of trailers for third-party games, which is also why the announcement of the Ratchet & Clank PC port was absent at the showcase, despite it being confirmed mere days later on Twitter. There are several first-party Sony projects that people are waiting news on, such as Ghost of Tsushima 2, PC ports of Demon's Souls and Bloodborne. Give us Bloodborne remastered, please, and whatever the heck Naughty Dog is working on for their single-player project. But it looks like some internal complications caused them to save all of their first-party announcements for later in the year, maybe because they knew how good the Xbox showcase is going to be. Hopefully by the time the Xbox showcase happens, it was an amazing event. Who knows, it might not be amazing, but we got Starfield, which is Pog. But if we end up getting a new PlayStation showcase later on in the year, that's likely where we would hear about this new God of War project, or just new Cory Barlog project, or just whatever Santa Monica Studios is working on. And I want to reiterate, a God of War Ragnarok spinoff is not confirmed, obviously, but with Santa Monica Studios looking for a very specific new hire, and with how ridiculously successful Ragnarok was from the sales perspective, it seems all but confirmed that Sony wants to keep that train chugging along in one way or another. So while it's possible we get a paid expansion at some point in the near future, I think it's much more likely we get a full-fledged spin-off game or mini sequel, or the VR game that I am predicting right now that will likely be announced later in the year, likely at the rumored first-party showcase. Another God of War announcement that people are patiently waiting for is the PC port of God of War Ragnarok, which I think we all know is coming eventually. God of War 2018 was ported to PC last year, and it was a raging success, so not only would Sony likely want to get a sequel on Steam as quickly as possible, but it wouldn't make much sense for them to port God of War 2018 if they weren't going to plan on doing it for the sequel as well. I was among the people expecting God of War Ragnarok's PC port to be announced at the May showcase, but since that obviously didn't happen, I guess we'll have to be waiting until the fall showcase for that as well. It's possible that Sony makes the PC community wait a little longer for such a high-profile game, even though that makes no sense to me. God of War Ragnarok was a runaway success, so why wouldn't Sony want to get the PC players in on the fun as quickly as possible? Likely because it's a system seller for the PlayStation 5, but still, with the 2018 game doing so well, selling over 1 million copies on PC in just a few months, on top of the fact that it was recently confirmed that Sony's PC division is expected to generate over $450 million in revenue during the fiscal year of 2023, Sony Sony is killing it on the PC, and while I do understand their desire to give console players the games first, I think it would heavily benefit them to release games on the PC a year after, so that way the hype could be real for the project, which I think is a win for everybody. Another major project for God of War that's in the works is the Amazon show that was confirmed in December of 2022, but since then there's been no news and everything has just kind of been incredibly slim. With the show being announced so recently and the writer's strike causing tons of damage to the entertainment industry, I think it's very unlikely that the show gets some sort of big debut this year. Rather, a God of War show will premiere on Amazon Prime mid to late 2024, maybe even later, and possibly release alongside a God of War Ragnarok spin-off game, depending on how quickly the game as well as the show gets through production. It's also possible that Sony decides to hold on to both projects so that they could release at roughly the same time and cross-promote one another, which would likely happen in early to mid 2025, assuming everything goes smoothly. But until then, we will just have to wait. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Are we getting a spin-off game for God of War Ragnarok, or are we just gonna have to wait until God of War 6? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe with your notifications turned on, and thank you so much to King Arthur Legends Rise for sponsoring today's video. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.